Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. We're going to get started here shortly with our webinar. As you can see on the screen, we're talking about streaming to social in the era of social distancing. That is quite a long table we have there. Two people. It's reminiscent of like a early 20th century formal like Downton Abbey dining hall. And maybe I'm ad-libbing a little too much, but we are certainly distancing socially, and we're going to talk about that today and how that impacts what has been going on social media, specifically with streaming. A lot of us, I'm sure, online when we have those moments between when we're working at home or cooking lots of meals at home or doing a lot of things at home, we check our social media, and you're probably seeing, and many of you are probably even producing content for live distribution on YouTube Live, Twitch, Facebook Live, various social media networks that support streaming, including LinkedIn. I've actually seen some really interesting videos recently on LinkedIn. So that's what we're going to talk about today in this webinar. We're going to talk about quickly and efficiently getting started with live streaming on social. Definitely cover some best practices when simulcasting across multiple social streaming destinations. There's some really gold nuggets as far as how to do that from a technical perspective that we're going to offer. And then how to leverage streaming technology to amplify your virtual events. And there's so many new virtual events that are popping up because we can't get together in large groups, quite obviously. And it's amazing to hear the creativity that is being deployed by people all over the world who are being very innovative in getting events out to social media that would normally be in a venue, a small, intimate restaurant or stage environment, or it could be any number of things. And then we're also going to get into some cost-effective tips for streaming to social while still delivering professional quality at scale. The professional aspect of this is critical. We want our streams to look great. We want them to be reliable and attractive, and we want people to come back and view them again. So we're excited. We have, I think, an all-star cast today. And as far as our agenda, I did speak a little bit about what we're covering, but as far as how we're going to get through this, we'll introduce our panelists here shortly. We're going to have a roundtable discussion, meaning we're going to cover some of the topics relating to social media streaming in this social distancing time. Talk about scaling, how we can scale video for low latency as well as broad distribution to potentially tens, if not hundreds of thousands of viewers, and then how to amplify your virtual events. And what I'm looking forward to as well are your question and answers. And that reminds me, please, if you do have a question, use the question tool inside the webinar application, or you may be joining us. We happen to be simulcasting this live on Facebook Live and YouTube Live, as you can see there. And we'd love to take your questions there as well. So again, thank you for joining. We're very excited to have you with us today. And I'd like to introduce our panelists. You certainly can see them on video. First, I'll introduce Charlie Good. He's our CTO and co-founder here at Wowza. Wave, Charlie. Did you wave?
Hello. Yep. Charlie
Hey,
Good.
Charlie.
Here I am sitting in my home office by myself like I'm supposed to.
All right. I think we all are. Good to see you here on live video. Barry Owen, Vice President Solutions Engineering. Say hi, Barry.
Howdy, folks.
And of course, I've got Andy O'Dower, who's our Vice President of Product Management. Hi, Andy. And then Rob Poach, Senior Director of Global Service Delivery. Rob has some really interesting perspective because his team are fielding all of your technical questions. So again, glad to be here today. Let's go ahead and dive in. A few short years ago, social media was a cool, streaming live to social media was this cool new toy. On YouTube, you had to have X number of subscribers to be able to do it. On Facebook Live, it was amazing. You could be on vacation, pull out your mobile phone, and go live to family and friends, and it was new and it was fun. Well, over the last few years, this infrastructure, this platform has developed to become a business tool, a commercial tool, a marketing tool, or just a messaging tool. There's so many creative ways that it's being used. And many of you are doing it. Many of you are trying to figure out how to do it better. And we're thinking right now, just as we approach the questions that we think you might be asking, and I've certainly been asked this question multiple times in the last 4 to 6 weeks, how do I get started streaming to social quickly? That's the question for the roundtable. So Andy, Charlie, Barry, and Rob, that's the question. How do people get started streaming to social quickly?
I mean, it's like we'll push our own products, right? Like, I mean, the Clearcaster was really built for that, like to really get up and going with social quickly. So I think, I mean, it really starts on the encoding side. And again, you can pick other off-the-shelf encoders as well. But certainly your first choice is encoder. I think it's all about quality. It's all about their integration with the different social platforms. Like that's certainly where I would start, is trying to find the right encoder, the right equipment. You know, and then there's all the other kind of brand side of it, but on the technical side, I think those are the important pieces.
I would say one thing is have a plan. What is the message you're trying to get out there? What content do you want to produce? And the content can be all kinds of things. People get engaged with a wide variety of stuff. But if you're an expert on cars, great, talk about cars. Just have a plan, have a message, be interesting, be relaxed. And then take advantage of all the tools that folks like us can provide to make sure it's a great user experience.
Yeah, it's a good point. We have a ton of content, on Wowza.com and our blogs and our forums that really outline how to get off the ground, right? I mean, for example, here today, I've got a Logitech webcam, an overhead light here for good lighting. Audio is key as well, right? So it's the little things that you want to think of and think about. If you are receiving that content, how do you want to receive it, right? You want to ensure that, lighting, audio, and video are all to the best that they can be within your budget or within whatever you have available to you. Dry runs, practicing, having that message, all of those things are important to ensure that your broadcast is as successful as possible.
Yeah, I would echo that and look at, others that do it really well. And a lot of people are very transparent now in this day and age of what tools they use, how they set things up, how they do the dry runs, how they test with small groups before they go live to larger groups. And you can have a really good story, a really good topic, but if you miss on the delivery, your viewer count's going to go down. Like we see a lot of people, if quality is bad or anything else like that, interactivity can drop. So, to Barry and Rob's point of, put yourself in the end viewer's shoes as you're planning your live stream. Always be thinking about the audience out there, some on great Wi-Fi connections, some on their phones, some very busy and using you as a second screen. You want to be engaging, you want to have quality. So always keeping in mind the people on the other side that are going to be viewing it, and then those dry runs are certainly helpful.
Yeah, you got to practice. Like, you can't emphasize enough that the dry runs, doing it where, doing it on location where you're going to do the actual event. If it's in your garage over Wi-Fi or in your kitchen, like all of that matters. Like every part of it matters to every piece of it is making sure you're testing where you're actually going to be doing the event and with the network conditions, with the equipment you're going to use, like all of the practice is really important.
Yeah, Charlie, that's a good point. It's one of the only things you can control is how much you practice and prepare. One of the questions we have is determining the need for a software encoder versus a professional encoder. And I know a lot of folks are picking up maybe OBS, which is a fantastic free encoding software that you can download for pretty much any OS platform. But I really want to focus on that testing and that technical aspect. It leads us into some of the capabilities of professional encoding, and I've got a table up there, and I'd love for the panel to comment on this because we don't always know how to set a bit rate in the settings panel in OBS. There are a couple default settings in there, but there's so much more to it. Just kind of curious, and let's talk about what's in this table here and contrast a little bit from the simple free software encoders all the way through to what we're proud of here at Wowza, and that's the Clearcaster Pro, which you can see does it all. So let's chat about this a little bit, guys.
Yeah, I mean, I would say on the software side, certainly if you're an expert and you know all the tweaks and tunings and stuff, I mean, again, they're great. Software encoders are awesome. I think that my one piece of advice is if you're going to use a software encoder, like shut everything else off that's on the machine. Like, can't tell you the number of people that start a presentation, they still have Outlook running, which can use a lot of resources. They still have all this stuff running in the background. Like you really need to strip the machine down to where you're just running that piece of software, because video encoding, all aspects of it, audio, video, take a lot of resources. And I think that's why moving into a hardware encoder makes a lot of sense, because then we strip all that stuff out. We're running as lean as we can. We've tested against all the different ways you're going to use that piece of equipment to make sure it works. So I think that's where the software encoders are a little bit weaker, is in the fact that they're a little bit less predictable, and you have to do a little bit more work up front to make sure they're kind of set up properly to be successful.
And there's a depth of things that you probably don't even want to learn about how to set up a stream encoded properly, things like keyframe intervals and bit rates and things like that people make mistakes on. They tend to go with the defaults. Rob can attest to this. We answer a ton of questions that we trace back to, well, what do you mean you have a 30-second keyframe interval? That's kind of long. So the nice idea about using something like a Clearcaster is this stuff's all automatic, and we do the settings for you based on the right thing to do for your conditions and the platform you're streaming to. And it saves you a lot of headache. And there's no 100% guarantees, but the out-of-the-box experience and going from hooking up a camera and streaming through a Clearcaster to a social media platform will 99% of the time yield you far better results than what you have to futz around with other stuff.
And not to call anyone out, like even the rocket scientists can't get it right. I think one of our examples is a broadcast that was done by NASA where they literally didn't get the keyframe interval right. It was frames versus seconds or something, and I can't remember exact details, but yeah, it's even hard for rocket scientists.
That's one thing we like to do is abstract that away. So to the point of practice, you can focus on your content, what you're going to deliver, if you have guests, being engaging and accomplishing your business goals, versus practicing far less and worrying far more about all the little bells and whistles and details and everything else like that. It just works. So you can focus on what you need to focus on for your business or for your hobby or for anything else like that. And we see very critical businesses. That's where they need to focus on their critical business, not the details that you can get wrong. And so that's where our focus is.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a great point on that, especially on the Clearcaster side. I mean, we see just large success with that product as compared to other encoders in the market. And not to, just highlight the success of Clearcaster, but from a support perspective, our team oftentimes finds themselves helping out with those more complex configuration type issues on other encoders than we ever see on the Clearcaster side. It is as close to a plug and play device as one can obtain, for sure.
And we went crazy. Like we started the Clearcaster project. It all started with us working with Facebook and trying to get it right from their standpoint. We spent a lot of time working with Facebook over the last 2.5, 3 years on it. And so what we really wanted to do is make sure end to end it just always worked. Because like live events, you don't get a second chance, right? They happen once. You want to make sure you get them right. And some of the events, like literally, they're just not going to happen again. You can reshoot a live kitchen scene where you're baking a cake and it's going to you do it the next day, but some events just happen and you miss that rocket launch. The other thing that we really wanted to do is open up the Clearcaster, and again, this is 100% plug, but so that it can be integrated into bigger systems. And so the idea being that we think there's a lot of larger entities that are out doing a lot of social media where they need to have people in the field, in different capacities, shooting different live events. So we wanted to make sure you could pick up our hardware, take it anywhere you wanted, plug it in, it phones home. It does not retain any settings from the previous event. It literally is driven by the next broadcast that it does. And so that idea and then it can be tightly integrated in with your backend system if you're a larger entity like a newspaper or a TV channel, where that Clearcaster is registered in a UI against an API that you can query and integrate in, where they can literally go to your own backend infrastructure, push a button to say start, and it will remotely start that Clearcaster running and stop it when the event's done. And so we went very, very far in trying to figure out how to create a very positive and healthy experience when doing social media streaming. And it really is built for that from the ground up. So anyways, end of my plug, but like that was the reason why we built it. We built it with Facebook to start. We've expanded it to go out to many more social platforms. But from the ground up, we wanted to make sure that if you don't miss that live event, because it's important.
Well, if you're watching this webinar and you sense any enthusiasm about the Clearcaster, it's genuine. We're very proud of this device and how it literally merges automation with what I would consider an extreme professional engineered stream. So if you are in any way interested, you can't miss it on our website, wowza.com. And we'd also love to speak with you. Our sales staff are eager to share the excitement behind this product, because as you can see with what we presented here, it takes care of a ton of critical detail that can make your stream immensely successful. I'm going to move on, and I want to say thank you for the comments on that last topic. I thought it was very interesting. In our next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about simulcasting. And, you know, simulcast, I always think about when I was a kid, and we'd turn on our favorite Chick Hearn radio announcer while we watched the Laker game, me and my dad. And it was like the coolest thing, because we were simulcasting, listening to one broadcast by watching another. And that's not necessarily what we're talking about here today. But simulcasts, we're simultaneously, we're doing it right now, sending this broadcast from Zoom, and we'll go over the architecture and what this looks like from a workflow perspective. But right now, we're simulcasting from Zoom to Wowza Streaming Cloud, and then from Wowza Streaming Cloud, which is running in a cloud service, it's going out to Facebook Live and YouTube Live, and we could certainly add more in parallel. There's virtually no limit to it, but let's talk about why you would want to do that, the strategy behind it, some of the other aspects, and we'll ask the panelists just to talk about some of the benefits, maybe even some of the pitfalls too, of why would you simulcast to social media?
Certainly.
Go ahead, Barry. I was just going to say is thinking about the audience. Your audience is going to be choosing many different platforms to where they prefer to watch, and you don't want to lose that opportunity. The previous days of direct all people to one domain, and that is the way you can get to content, are clearly over. And not only multiple devices, but multiple platforms, and more grow every day. And if you want to get your message out and get distribution, you need to go where the audience is. And often is the case, they're on all sorts of spectrum connections, all sorts of spectrum platforms, and they want to get that same content. And so I think that's the kind of the first and foremost, back to thinking about your audience and where they are. And I think the expectations are growing more and more every day that content is just ubiquitous, and they'll be able to access it anywhere they want.
Yeah, it's a lot about reach and availability, right? So, not only can you go to social platforms, but you can go to your own website or your own mobile app, all at the same time, right? So not only can someone who's happens to be somewhere where they can access their Facebook experience, or someone who's maybe sitting somewhere where they don't have access to anything but a plain web page, you can cover everything, and you can cover everything with very high quality, leveraging the social media networks themselves, but also our own CDN partners to have a very large global footprint. And it also gives you some security and some redundancy in that, should a social media platform have a hiccup, there's other areas where other avenues and ways you could watch the stream. So you also have a ton of control over what you can do, which is great. You can set things up with various forms of secure token authentication to determine who can watch and who can't watch, and it just gives you a ton of options.
I love the idea of using it for redundancy. I mean, it's clever as heck, right? Like, why not take advantage of the social platforms, right? And sometimes it's one social platform is the right place to watch it from mobile versus desktop versus on your TV or set-top box or TiVo, whatever you have at home. But this idea of using it both for that, to reach for the platform itself, but also for redundancy, and also getting the best experience on whatever platform you're on. I mean, people now are clever, right? They know you have a presence in each of these social platforms, and so they're going to go find you in the other place if the current one isn't working, right? So it behooves you to make sure you are broadcasting everywhere, because they almost expect you to these days.
One thing I think about with simulcasting to social, I'll bring up a workflow here that we can take a look at, is recognizing that YouTube may allow a higher resolution stream than Facebook Live. Or if you're streaming to Periscope, they may have updated it, but at one point I believe it was only 960p, which is a weird resolution if you ask me. But you had to actually condition, and in our case, transcode the stream so that it was aligning with the preferred requirements of the target. So for example, what you see on the screen here is how to scale, how to scale with simulcasting. You've got your live event over on the left side. And it was interesting, Charlie said earlier, sometimes you don't get a second chance at a lot of these. So you have something that you really want to get out there to everybody. It's going into a camera, it's going into an encoder, and getting into our Wowza Streaming Cloud environment. And that can come from a variety of devices. You can use something like our Wowza GoCoder app, which is available in the App Store. You can use, of course, we've talked about software and hardware encoders, all the way up to and including very high-end encoding platforms. So you can get, say, a 4K stream into Wowza Streaming Cloud. You can transcode it so that it works perfectly on Facebook Live, perfectly on YouTube Live, and other services. So you might be sending a simulcast, but one stream might be 4K, one stream might be 1080p, and you can have various frame rates and other bits if you really want to get into that detail. So how to scale? You leverage Wowza Streaming Cloud CDN to scale on demand and to any size audience. It ensures optimal streaming output with real-time visibility into stream performance, including bandwidth consumption and number of viewers. And I'm going to pause on that one because it's awesome. When you're streaming through Wowza Streaming Cloud, we've got this tab in there called Stream Health. And you can go in and see the bandwidth utilization coming from the encoder. You can see what's going out to the CDN. But what I like is the keyframe interval, which is a tremendous sign of health or lack of. So when you're streaming live, sometimes if you're going directly to a social media network, some of them have stream health options when you're producing content, but others don't. And you don't always know what's going on with your stream from that first mile up. And Wowza Streaming Cloud can really help with that visibility into how many people are watching, how the stream is performing. And then the cool thing about a CDN, we were talking about redundancy earlier. Wowza Streaming Cloud is powered by Fastly CDN, and we also use Akamai. And those services can accommodate huge spikes in viewership. So if you're a news organization, maybe you're covering something that all of a sudden goes quote unquote viral across Twitter or another network, and they're streaming off your website. Using a CDN like what we provide through our service is tremendous in its ability to scale. I got a little got a little chatty there on this slide. I'm curious if any panelists have something they'd like to add.
Well, one of the things you do get with cloud through with our CDN partner Fastly is you get real-time data back from how many people are viewing the stream, where they're viewing the stream at, what was their experience, which is great. And these are the things with simulcasting. You have options. You get a lot of reach with the social outlets like Facebook and YouTube and LinkedIn. You give up a little bit of control, right? They're distributed the stream for you. So depending on what you're after, you can have a little bit more flexibility, a little bit more control by using a CDN. So you have options, and that's what really this is all about.
Definitely.
I think it's one of the real value adds too, is that, to the point about options, each event, each use case might be, is and will be unique, potentially per business or, on an event by event basis. And so I think what cloud offers is just that a la carte option. You can go straight to just your website. You can go straight to the link that, that the cloud service provides you to distribute to your end viewership, or you can use it to simulcast to one or many social media destinations. And just having that plan to understand what your intent is and how you want your content to be received and by whom is all part of that pre-planning process.
Definitely. One thing I want to add before I move on is how some organizations are actually pre-rolling and mid-rolling and even post-rolling content when they're going live. And it really is interesting to do that with Wowza Streaming Engine, and you can do it with an encoder too, where you can actually play something you've produced previously. It can be something like a sizzle reel, it can be promotional content. A lot of house of worship because of the challenge of social distancing, they're actually doing a lot of what they call premiering on Facebook Live and YouTube, where you upload a VOD asset and it streams out as live. But with Wowza Streaming Cloud, you can actually send in pre-recorded data as if it was live, and then it can go out through these channels that are optimized for live social media simulcasting. So again, I just wanted to throw that in there. I want to move on to our next topic here, which is how to amplify your virtual events, which means deploy a CDN.
That is, let me go back to one subject.
Sure.
Something you said, what just triggered something. I think that's another way to use social, and we see that a lot, where it's used as a preview to the real event. Like it's a way to generate an audience. It's a way to, even behind the scenes stuff, like which people really want to see. Like think of it as the second screen behind the scenes type of view into some event. And I think that's a really, for bigger things, the NBA
Right.
and the NFL, and like we certainly see a lot of that. But with anything you're doing, like there's just people, if the people are interested in your brand or interested in what you have to say, they're thirsty to see the behind the scenes stuff, the teasers, the trailers. Like, and I would never hesitate to use social for that, because it's a really very cost-effective way to spread
Absolutely.
your brand, but you don't have to necessarily then have the full event on that platform. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, you can use it as a traffic driver to your own site, right? Throw up something really interesting 15 minutes before, show them what's going on. When the event goes live, you send them on over to your site. It's a great way to drive demand and drive traffic.
And cool. Sorry, you can move forward now, Tim.
And I don't want to. This is much more interesting. One thing I'm thinking in the era of COVID, it's pretty clear that when you go live on Facebook, it's promoted. It seems to rise to the top when you post a live stream. And there's a lot of information, public safety, public health, business continuity. There's all sorts of people experimenting and trying new things to get their information out. It can be very isolating for a company that's used to working in a large brick and mortar building. So if you have content, you can get it out through social, and in many cases, it gets much more eyeballs, if you will, than if you just post it as a VOD asset. So I personally think it's very exciting, and you can definitely leverage all the CDN and everything that we're talking about here, not only with live, but with what we call live to VOD content. But let's talk about amplifying, and let's talk a little more about CDN. I heard someone was going to comment. Did someone almost say something? No? Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to add too on this amplifying. That's again what we've talked about. The expectations of your audience is growing and has grown every day, and their locations are all over the place now, especially in social distancing. And so, if you are previously a local house of worship or a business that has offices all over the world, you want to make sure that your message is delivered all over the world with the same level of quality that is right down the hall that you previously experienced if you're an enterprise business, or any type of critical communication that you're not just thinking first mile and you're not just thinking content, you're thinking that last mile. How do I ensure that I reach people where they care about and most, and where they matter the most? And it's not just get the content out, it's make sure it makes that whole loop right back to the viewer, and that's where CDNs come in.
And it's interesting, the quality piece of it, because I'm a great British baking show watcher, right? I think that's an amazing show, but it's really raw. Like, you watch production quality on that. I mean, it's interesting, but it's very kind of raw and simple. I watched another baking show on Netflix or one of the platforms, and it was like so overly produced, it was hard to watch. And then so you watch the first season, seem overly produced. Second season, they toned it down, because they realized what people were interested in is the competition and the banking and the rawness of that, and some of the rawness of that overproduction value wasn't necessarily needed. So I also don't think there's a huge barrier of entry to get started. Like, you have to think about your own brand and really what that low bar is. But in some ways, just don't hesitate to get online and do stuff, because some people want to see it in a little more raw form. Certainly, tools like we provide can really help with the quality, but then there's also the production value. And I think that can vary based on your brand and what's important to your audience and what you think's important to them. But it was interesting to watch this show, literally way overproduced in season 1, drop back down to something that was much simpler in season 2.
I think that's terribly important. Andy, I think you had mentioned earlier that we don't want people to even recognize the tech. We don't want people to say, oh, that was a great CDN that distributed that stream. We want people to be excited about the baking show or be excited about the content in general. And Charlie, you had mentioned, and I can't agree more, people get really worried about it's got to be professional. It's got to be high quality. You know what? Just start doing it. Learn along the way. Don't be afraid. Break our CDN, break your encoder. We'll help you fix it. Rob Poach has an incredible team that can do that, especially if you're a Wowza customer. I want to hit something here. We've really talked about CDNs both through social and through a solution like Fastly. It's scalable, it's fast, it's quality, it's reliable. Let me ask a dumb question. How long does it take to set up a CDN? It sounds so intimidating, content delivery network. I mean, what's involved with that, Barry?
Thankfully, we've done all that for you, right? So, you go to Wowza Cloud and you set up a live stream and you get a playback URL. I hate to say it, but it just works, right? It's all transparent to you. It's very simple. You can literally set up a stream. I can download GoCoder. I can stream up from my phone to Wowza Cloud to the CDN and stream my basement to 1 million people, in 3 minutes. It's super simple. We've taken all the guesswork out of it for you. We have super good CDN partners. They've spent hundreds of millions of dollars building high performance, high capacity networks, locations around the world. It just makes it dead simple.
Yeah, and you look at that from the other end, like what's happening when your person comes in to go play that stream, right? So they're literally hitting an edge. They have a DNS entry that's being, delivered to the proper edge to give it the shortest path to wherever that player is. That stream's being replicated on the ingestion side to make sure it gets to all the different edge points and delivered in the most efficient way. Like what's actually happening behind the scenes is a lot. And even
super complex.
The little bit of setup that we're doing, if you were to go approach one of these CDNs to do it like on your own, like there is a lot to it. There's a lot to set up. There's a lot to think about. And we have taken a lot of that away. So even though from the outside in, when your viewers go and view that URL, it looks quite simple, there is a lot of machinery and tech around making sure that that stream gets delivered reliably. And I think that's what's cool about a CDN. They're taking that lift and doing that work for you.
Yeah, the hard stuff's being done behind the curtain, but if you're watching this and you're hearing the term CDN, it is quite literally within arm's reach. Rob, I think I interrupted you. You were going to make a comment. Go ahead.
I was just going to, so for anybody watching this live or who's going to watch it on the playback who says, well, sure, you have Barry and Charlie, they're the tech minds behind Wowza that makes it all work. As a personal story, I started at Wowza just shy of 5 years ago with zero streaming experience, right? My background was in video conferencing. And so I made it a mission, new employee on the team to figure out, well, how does this stuff all work? And Wowza Cloud of 5 years ago now, within 30 minutes, I downloaded my free trial, set up my camera through my phone, and had a distributable URL to all my friends and family that said, hey, check out where I'm working now. I'm going to do live streaming from my living room. I spun this up in a half hour. And had I had more friends, that could have gone much more viral and taken advantage of the CDN. But the point being, Wowza Streaming Cloud makes getting from 0 to 1 incredibly easy. And the fact that you can plug our Clearcaster into that environment to then simulcast and hit those CDNs, all of our components work together to achieve your end goal, as as small group as it might be or as global scale as it might be. Just depends on your use case.
I think that's a good point too, as you can go as small and easy of an entry point as you need to get started. And like you said, practice, iterate, make it work. And all you have to do is get more friends, more audience, and it just works. You don't have to do anything else. It auto scales. We have redundancy on cloud. We're agnostic, and it can be deployed on Google, on AWS, on Azure, and if all three of those goes down, you've got bigger problems than your live stream.
That's a true statement.
Means the entire internet has gone down throughout the world. So you can scale up and not have to worry about doing any work. I mean, that's our job, is to abstract away all those complexities so it's easier for you to get started, and not only get started and be successful, but to be successful and not worry as your audience grows, as viewers grow, as you want to do more complex things with the stream and integrate with AI and ML and all sorts of other stuff that you want, and analytics and other things that you want to do to tie into other technologies. We're already there, and we're already working and behind the scenes to make that easier for you to do that.
It's a great point. And, you know, on those newer technology, well, newer, I mean, you know, things like 360 drone video. I mean, we are in lockstep with those industries as well to ensure that, you know, whatever content that you want to broadcast in the format you're choosing, you know, our product suite supports that as well. And, you know, we see a number of cases come in with customers saying, hey, I want to try this. Is it possible? And the answer more times than not is absolutely, and here's how.
Well, you can get your content distributed. We've talked about streaming, simulcasting to social media. We've talked about leveraging a world-class content delivery network, and we've emphasized that it's within arm's reach, and it's not that hard. What we do want to get into is something a little more complex, and I can tell you from working with a lot of customers who are trying to expand their streaming right now, is the production aspect of it, and in particular, the interactivity. I was on the phone yesterday with a production firm, and they are trying to convert these large, high energy panels that they have for training sales staff. And we're talking about some very professional individuals, and they're used to, as a company, having people on the same stage really hashing out and inspiring people. They're trying to move that over to where they can present it in a webcast, and maybe using a lot of the resources we've talked about. But one thing that is the magic in a lot of these discussions, like what we're having here, is the interactive component. Barry can interrupt me. Charlie can interrupt me. Andy can say something funny, and it makes it interesting. And if you notice, a lot of these encoders that we're talking about, they're really, really good at sending one stream up to a streaming server environment and a CDN. But there's a lot more to it, and it comes down to using low latency technology to mix together a lot of stream sources so that people can interact, but at the same time get that to scale. And I think even in that statement I made, it's a little bit kind of a head scratcher. But let's talk about a little bit here about WebRTC, what it is, how you can build interactivity with it, and how it can kind of complement what many people are trying to do with these interactive streaming use cases. Andy, I want to lean on you on this one. Do you have any thoughts on just kind of the initial formation of why you would want to use an interactive component?
Sure. I think, you know, first, that interactivity just adds a whole other layer of interest for people. I mean, just naturally, we like to talk to each other. We like to have back and forth all day, every day in our interactions. And so, you know, from a world of lean back only and just see what is presented to me, that's one type of environment. We traditionally call that lean back versus the lean forward type of experience. And especially in a world of social distancing, that lean forward is missing in our day-to-day. And so we're naturally looking for that lean forward experience. In addition to all the massive Netflix streaming and all the other lean back that happen, we're social animals. We want to be able to engage. And so being able to leverage something like WebRTC to have that engagement, that has shown in a lot of, studies of that increases retention. And if you're spending all this time and energy to put together some content that you want to get out to the world, if in the first few minutes that engagement goes down, that's really hard to get it back. And you spend a lot of time and energy to get that audience in. You want to be able to keep them, and that interactivity is what has been proven and shown to keep them engaged. And WebRTC, to be able to enable that, especially into this day and age, it's right at this intersection of kind of like voice over IP and web and browsers. And, so that lends itself to being in so many devices where there are browsers. There's billions of devices with Chrome, on Android operating systems and Safari and iOS and Firefox and things like that. So you've got now this ability with WebRTC through the browser to be able to get multiple inputs like we're doing right now, all through webcams and, so many billions of devices that have browsers and have cameras to be able to get that engagement going. And so I think that's, when you look at You know, interactivity is engagement, and that begats retention, and that's really what you want to keep as an audience engaged. So then they not only watch and participate through your one-time content, that they want to come back the next week and the week after that and the week after that.
So the interactivity is critical, and there are folks who want to build this themselves for business reasons, for security reasons, or because they just have a need to have something different. How do we do that? I know Wowza Streaming Engine and Wowza Streaming Cloud support WebRTC Cloud in a different capacity than our engine to some degree. I'm just kind of curious, what would the panel say here? Anyone on, how do you do it? Why would you do it with WebRTC?
I mean, to me, like, again, not to say the bad word, but Flash, right? So Flash was the technology, Adobe Flash, that did this first, right? And WebRTC, since Flash has kind of disappeared or is less relevant, like WebRTC has taken that spot. And, what is its strongest value is exactly what Andy said, which is it's in every browser, or in most browsers, almost every browser now. And so now you can invite people into your presentation, your webinar, your, whatever your social platform is or means to kind of communicate. Now you can invite people in that don't have a software encoder or a piece of software installed on your system. They can authenticate through your website, and then they would use their webcam and their microphone, and it's all kind of done by the browser to be able to contribute to your presentation, right? And so I think that's the power. It's a no install way of getting people to contribute audio and video. And I would make sure that audio is another important piece of it as well. Like, it can be just audio. It doesn't have to necessarily be video. And we see it as you have a regular one-to-many presentation. I'm speaking, and I want to bring in the speaker, right? Now I have the ability to do that in a way that they're literally just coming to my website to contribute content to my overall presentation. So distance learning, few-to-few type communication, I think that's where WebRTC is extremely strong and really fills that hole that Flash has left. So anyways, that's where I kind of see it fitting.
It really is amazing technology, and it has so much utility purposes as well. I'm working with a large news production organization. They oversee many news stations, and they're using WebRTC to serve a return feed and teleprompter content out to reporters who are sitting at their desks just like us today. And I just love the fact that somebody can get a hold of Wowza Streaming Engine, take hold of our documentation, and build out a utility stream to get data out to people who need it. And that's, kind of a few to few. I'm just trying to highlight for people watching, give you, we've talked about interactivity. It really is something you can't say too much. You can't interact enough, because that's what makes the content so interesting and worthy of watching, but also the utility aspect. Getting video and audio from point A to point B fast is something that WebRTC enables. I want to move on to Q&A here, because typically this is the most fun part of our webinars when we do host them. But if you do have questions about WebRTC, you're welcome to ask through the channels we have available here, but you're also welcome to reach out to just go to wowza.com, get a hold of a salesperson. If you'd like to speak with someone on our sales engineering staff about some of the details of what WebRTC does and how it's implemented, we're eager to help you learn and potentially expand what you're doing using our products and others to facilitate. So let's move on to Q&A. Justin, you've been patient. I'm sure you've been watching the feed, what people have been asking across not only Zoom, but I'm sure we have people on Facebook and YouTube Live. What are some questions? Let's see if we can stump the chump here today on streaming here. What do you got?
Well, we've got comments coming in via Facebook and YouTube. No questions at the moment from there. So I'm going to jump into some of the questions that are coming in just through our webinar here. Jason wanted to know a little more about the required upload speeds for streaming out. And certainly I think that's dependent on simulcasting, but I'd love for you to answer.
Well, you can actually take advantage of that simulcasting by sending a single stream to Wowza Cloud and having it simulcast for you. So, obviously your acquired bandwidth varies with a lot of things, right? A 4K stream takes considerably more bandwidth than a 1080p stream or a 720p stream. The nice thing about using a Clearcaster and then using a Clearcaster to send it to cloud, it'll self-optimize for the best experience based on your bandwidth and give that the best possible stream it can given what you have. That being said, there's general guidelines, and this is where testing comes into play, right? If you've done some testing at your home and you have 5 megabits available, maybe send a 2.5 meg stream and give yourself some headroom. Maybe go down to 720p when you need to versus trying to send a 1080p stream or a 4K stream when you don't really need to. So it varies a lot. It requires testing. We can certainly help, or just use an intelligent device like the Clearcaster and make your life easy.
Definitely.
But to get to hard numbers, like to me, a 1080p stream looks good at 6 to 8 megabits per second. Audio is negligible in that formula. Like it runs at like 96, so that doesn't tend to matter. 96, 128 are good bit rates for those. But like 1080p 30, generally around somewhere around 6 to 8 megabits per second is really nice looking video.
All right.
I think
I think Jason had a 20 megabyte upload speed available to him. So it sounds like you're saying 1080p, 30 frames per second should be just fine.
for sure.
I think we default to 8 in the Clearcaster, and again, leverage that adaptive bitrate encoding, knowing that we're going to fill the pipe as much as we can, but 8 looks gorgeous for sure.
All right. Soren had a few questions, specifically talking about their experience with hardware encoders. And they wanted to understand how we actually approach the hardware when it came to Clearcaster. Is encoding actually done in a purpose-built chip, or are you actually running a very smart optimized software, but on an off-the-shelf server enclosure with generic hardware?
Mostly the second thing. So for anything 1080p 60 and below, we're very transparent about it, right? We're leveraging X264 for the encoding piece of it. And so that's an incredibly efficient software encoder. I think the important part is we've tuned the heck out of it to run on the box, on the piece of hardware that we have. We've made sure that we're running with everything else kind of off and it's kind of done properly. But X264 is an amazing piece of software as far as video encoding goes. And then again, they do a really great job of VBR and being able to alter the bitrate while the stream is running. So if you watch the health monitor on the Clearcaster, you can see it dip and go back up and down. Like you really don't. It's hard to see those changes. Like the image will get a little softer if the bit rate's not quite there and it dips down to the 4 or 5 megabits per second. But X264 is amazing at retaining detail. So, but anyways, yeah, that's the way it's built.
Awesome. Scott wanted to know, and I think this is partially because, well, we're using Zoom here to do a conference, yet we're streaming out via multicasting to, as we were saying before, YouTube, Facebook, our own hosted pages. And he wanted to know if we're thinking about coming out with our own version of conferencing.
Handle that. I think, yes, we're using Zoom right now, and for all parents out there, I've had teachers call and say, Andy, you're in streaming. What should we use? We need to go today with a teachers conference that needs to be out to hundreds of parents. I'd say, okay, fire up Zoom. That's great. Use that today. Where we've positioned ourselves in the market over the years is to be able to build the tools into a platform. And we have, frankly, many customers of ours that have built their own webinar businesses to many different industries and verticals. And so, where we've positioned ourselves is to be those experts in the technology, to build out the tools into a platform so that many other businesses can build on top of that platform and engage in all sorts of different tools. From, we have customers that are literally turning 911 phone calls using WebRTC into FaceTime. Which is revolutionary. 911 hasn't really evolved since about 1968. I think was the first phone call that happened, in the US. And so you've got, interactive communications happening in that way. You've got companies that have built webinars, businesses themselves leveraging Wowza underneath that. And so for us, we focus first and foremost on that platform that can be extensible for all different types of businesses to be able to be successful. So we like to say we're a force multiplier for those businesses. So I think we're going to see many, many more, and we see them all day of every day, people coming to us with new ideas for how to leverage streaming and how to leverage live interactive. And so, we, prefer to be that force multiplier for businesses that can build similar types of applications, because there's new use cases every day that pop up that go beyond just another webinar tool or just a video conferencing tool.
I mean,
Awesome.
and some of Zoom competitors do run powered
Correct,
by, in different ways, by WOWs. I mean, exactly what Andy's saying. Like, we do power some of those tools. Us building our own tool, no. I mean, we're more into the leverage, like the powering other tools.
We've architected all our products to be very API extensive, to both, command, control, enhance, extend across the board. And, we take the headaches out of doing the heavy lifting for you. We can manage the infrastructure for you. We can do some of the bits that, kind of take away from your main business driver of building your application. And we've set ourselves up to be the best we can be at that part.
All right.
I just add one last thing is we're also really building out these solutions to make it even easier to say, if you are focused on a live interactive, here is the solution and here are the best ways to do it. If you are doing a security and surveillance monitoring, here's the best solution for you. It all leverages our same platform though. So, we've kind of taken that next evolution.
Okay. In terms of hardware, some people are asking about suggested components. For example, we're talking about the encoder being the Clearcaster. What would you recommend for camera or any of the other equipment involved?
You have an awful lot of choices.
Yeah.
The nice thing about the Clearcaster is the Clearcaster can take anything from a super high-end professional camera running, running SDI to your basic camcorder, or even a computer or a screen that can spit out HDMI and kind of everything in between. You can get a pretty darn high quality stream with a reasonable 720p 1080p camcorder. You'd have less control and something that you might get with professional camera, but you don't have to go blow your budget to get high quality.
It's probably a fair statement to say that with stuff you have laying around your office or your home nowadays, you can get off the ground very easily. A GoPro, for example, is a great camera to use just to get started. That does audio and video out through the HDMI that can plug right into your Clearcaster or into your software encoder. I mean, there are things that you can leverage within your reach that are not, budget prohibitive, that can get you started. And as we're talking about, the whole crux of this is to just get off the ground and get started, and then, work through the issues and iterate as you see them pop up.
Yeah, I'd say, and not worry about the, when Tim mentioned it earlier of the, super high polished and the authentic. There is a spectrum. Sometimes when you get stuck in the middle, it's not too polished, it's not too authentic. That's kind of a weird spot. It's okay to be authentic to get started. It's engaging, and that's where you can use things that you have and not blow an entire budget. And then if you want to do the bigger high end, then you do it the right way.
The other piece too, I think is important is, I think everybody wants it to be the best of the best. It has to be 4K. It has to be, sub 1 second latency. We find a lot of our customers say that that's their desired end state, or it has to be that. And then when they realize what's involved in actually achieving that at scale, it becomes a different conversation. And when at that point, that's where we start seeing the concessions, right? Well, 720p is probably okay because most of my viewers are on mobile and they won't know the difference between 720 and 1080, right? Or things of that nature. So it really comes down to understanding your audience, how they're going to be viewing you, what the expectations are, and then, building from there.
All right. And that being said, as we're talking about how to get up and running and ramping up, John Ann was asking if there are pathways that a social enterprise with very little money can start and then ramp up easily.
Yeah, use your phone, right? I mean, we have an app in the store. It's called GoCoder. Download GoCoder, broadcast to WowZa Cloud. It's dead simple. It works great. That's certainly a place to start for very, very little money. And as Rob said, it's like, you have a computer with a camera in it. You know, you have stuff laying around your house. You can get it done in various ways.
All right. And Jonan is also asking, what's the latency numbers using this encoder?
Clearcaster?
I believe so, yeah.
So we can, I believe we have templates for this. So like by default, I think it's one-ish seconds that the encoder's adding in latency. It can be tuned down to where it's just a couple frames. So now you're talking 40, 50 milliseconds of latency plus whatever the transfer is, which isn't much, like generally another 30 or 40 milliseconds. You know, and then there are other latency factors as you look at further down the chain. But the Clearcaster itself, by default, it's like a second. I think you can tune it down to, you know, 50, 60 milliseconds.
All right.
That's a great question too, as it relates to simulcasting, right? Each platform might, you know, introduce their own, you know, latency inherent to that platform, right? So just something to consider as well if you have time related or time-based content.
Yeah, you're giving away your content when you put it on a social media network versus if you're using, say, Wowza Streaming Cloud, you can tune the HLS, which is the traditional way or conventional way to get into CDN to 2-second chunks, I believe it is. And so you have some control or more control, certainly, when you're using a private service that you subscribe to versus just sending it off into a social media environment. So if you're looking for low latency or ultra low latency, you definitely want to look towards a commercial product like what we offer.
All right. And getting a question from Bruce, I'll read it as is. I think he's talking about maybe the way we're managing things in the Clearcaster. I'm not sure, but he says, managing the schedule from multiple platform front ends can get messy when trying to simulcast. So is there a platform that can merge my broadcast event schedule with these multiple platforms?
I mean, we don't really try to solve that problem on the Clearcaster side other than making it very easy to schedule broadcasts that are going to happen in the future and have them kind of waiting pending, and you can easily see them in our UI. As far as actually like calendar, like the calendar part of it, like I'm not sure how you would manage that piece. So I don't know. Like we try to make it as easy as possible to queue up the future events and make them sitting there waiting to be executed, but we don't certainly go beyond that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would add, I think there would be limitations in terms of calendar integration with what the various social platforms would allow to via their either APIs or their tooling as well. So there's a dependency on that as well, beyond is what Charlie described.
All right.
It's impressive what you can do with API commands working with that Wowza streaming engine. If you have the Clearcaster, say, running all the time, you can teach yourself how to use the API using our documentation, and you can tell the cloud when to turn on and when to send which stream where. So say Facebook or YouTube, you're using what they call persistent stream keys. It's going to start streaming when it gets that stream. And so you could create your own matrix using Wowza Cloud and thoughtful use of our API to really help manage that mess. It does take discipline. You're dealing with schedules, lots of moving parts. I don't think there's ever going to be a real silver bullet for that, especially with simulcasting. But it is a good feeling when you can get control of it using APIs in a streaming server.
All right. Good point. I also agree. We have an API. It's easy for us to be able to take an API and connect that with the different social media tools that they're looking to use for. But I think they're thinking about it like with blog posts and other things where people are scheduling events at these times. Callum is asking, and I think this relates to he's trying to do multi-language live via a single Clearcaster. And he wants to know if there are any plans with the Clearcaster Pro to offer upgradable capture cards so you can select specific SDI inputs to stream out.
So today you can select from, so say there were 3 languages worth of audio coming into the capture card. They were on different SDI IDs, audio IDs. You can do that today. You can select through the API which IDs you want to listen to. What we don't have available is the ability to stream multiple languages at the same time. we talked about that. I'm not sure when we would address that issue or add that feature, but today you can select from the multiple audio channels through the API.
Okay. And Christian is saying that you guys all look awesome right now. Maybe you can explain the setup that you're all using, the tools you're using in order to stream. I think maybe they're just talking about cameras and audio equipment.
It's all smoke and mirrors, Justin. I'll be really candid with you. I bought a green screen on Amazon for like $20. It's hanging behind me. I've got two very inexpensive LED lights here that are kind of giving me a little softer foreground light. And then I've got like a decent microphone. And so, you know, I hate to admit this, but I'm literally in my garage workshop. I'm not in a production studio, and it's a quiet place where I can participate in something like this. So that's an awesome question. You can go out there and find relatively affordable little resources you can do to bump up. Rob, I've always been impressed with your background. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
That's just sheetrock. I mean, my setup is very similar. I have a Logitech Brio webcam, inexpensive $15 LED USB powered, front light that I can, toggle on and off. You can see the difference when it shuts down. Lighting and video is key. And for audio, I'm using Apple AirPods, right? I mean, for sub a couple of $100, you are able to get, high quality video. Lighting though, I can't stress enough. Lighting can make or break the way your video comes across to the far end. Poor lighting will make you come across as a poor quality stream.
Also using a Logitech Brio HD. I think you could probably buy them used on Amazon for $150 for camera, AirPods, and just open the windows so natural light.
There you go.
Right. I think I'm using the same camera. So somehow we all bought the same one. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think the point is just work with what you've got, make it look as optimal as possible. There are a lot of people, I see them on LinkedIn posting on how to make your Zoom meeting look better. And there's real simple things, getting the camera so where you're looking more straight at it instead of like, looking down, etc. A lot of great best practices out there.
Okay, I'm going to hit the last two questions that are coming in because I know we're already pretty much at the end of our time here. There are many questions actually we have, but there are a few that I've actually said we'd answer. So I'm going to hit those last two here, which is Jose is asking, what's Wowza's main business alliances for social distancing streaming solutions? So do we have any recommendations, I guess, for social streaming distancing to be using right now?
Well, let's try to break out what a business alliance is. You guys have any ideas on that? Is that like a recommended set of vendors or products that we use maybe?
It kind of feels like what we've been talking about the whole time is that, by using Wowza Cloud with whether you use a Clearcaster or any other sort of encoder, you've got a lot of options, right? So we certainly partner with Facebook. We can send streams to YouTube Live. We can send streams to LinkedIn Live. We can send streams to Vimeo. We can send streams almost anywhere. Or you have the option of just sending it to your own website using the direct playback URLs from cloud. So, those are the kind of recommendations we would have. You also have the ability to use something like Zoom and have, a few-to-few session in the Zoom session and then send that stream to cloud to distribute to 100,000 other people to watch. So we've got things, it really comes down to what's your use case? What are you trying to leverage? Who are you trying to reach?
Yeah, I think one of the value adds too is that Wowza is generally agnostic, right? I mean, Barry just named 6 or 7 major platforms and or companies that Wowza works very well with. We have very detailed documentation on and proven use cases where it's success. So I think to answer that question would be, anyone, right? For the most part. I mean, for most of the larger platforms and the more commonplace areas where video is consumed, Wowza, knock on wood, should have no problem or minimal problem having you broadcast to there.
Yeah, we're not a proprietary platform. We attend the major broadcasting trade shows and other industry trade shows. And one thing that I enjoy about Wowza is we tend to fit with whatever market segment we're working with: broadcast, medical, security and surveillance. We have various partnerships and just relationships with a lot of firms. So again, to echo Barry's point, one of the cool things about Wowza is it really does fit where you need it to fit. So it's not you have to use it with Acme Incorporated or Big Evil Streaming Company.com. I mean, we really can work with whomever.
All right. And the last question, I think we've answered before, but I'll say it again because people keep saying, I want to know this. They just want to be clear. They want to know if we have a way to integrate WebRTC conferences to Wowza as multiple input feeds.
I would say absolutely. If you're thinking about let's say you need 20 people that all need to send in a stream from a phone that's ultra low latency. You can have 20 streams connected to a Wowza server, and then you can access those in a variety of ways, including WebRTC. So out of the gate, I would say, the scale, having multiple parallel streams, at least that's my initial impression, doesn't sound too intimidating. Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, I would add too, that's the advantage of Wowza beyond specific to WebRTC. I mean, WebRTC first introduced, people had a lot of fun, browser to browser, real-time chat. But beyond that, when I want to save that, I want to do a lot more with that interactive conversation or that interactive video experience. That's when you move into a territory where you are leveraging something like Wowza to be able to do so much more with that than just a one-to-one type chat.
Yeah, by having a media server in the middle of that WebRTC workflow, you open up a ton of options. And yeah, there's work to do on the browser side. You'll have to create some fancy JavaScript and things like that. But we have samples to get you started. But you do have a ton of possibilities there, including hybrid workflows where you can scale out those 20 people talking to each other to 1 million more.
But to be fully straightforward, like today the functionality that's like just not there, if that's what this is about, is stream muxing or stream compositing, both for audio and video, and those are things we're looking and thinking about. But there is not a way to composite multiple video or audio streams into one and send them back out as a, like you see here, a grid or a pattern or like whatever. That is something we don't do yet. And are certainly thinking about, but for WebRTC, whatever comes in can go back out in the same, in the same or different form it came out, stream by stream by stream.
All right. Well, thank you guys for answering questions. I'm going to turn it back to Tim. We do have other questions here. Hopefully we'll be able to get support to answer some of those, though.
Thanks, Justin. We've covered a lot of ground here, and there probably is more that we could have covered. But I want to say, number one, thank you for joining and participating as a viewer. If you have any questions, we really want to speak with you. In the display right now, you can see we have our sales at wowza.com, also our toll-free number. You can check out our pricing plans at wowza.com/pricing. Rob Poach, who's been on with us here, he has a tremendous team in several time zones that are available to assist with technical support. We really want to help you, especially during this difficult time where we're all having to innovate and do business differently and do streaming differently. I hope the message is clear. That at Wowza, we want to help you be successful. We want to help people that are trying to do new and different things in this challenging time. And I hope you can look to us as a resource as well as a solution. And again, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure having you all. I'd like to say thank you to the panelists. We give you a virtual applause. Okay, that was a poor attempt, but thank you again so much. And we look forward to the next time when we cover another streaming topic. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Is it?
Thanks.